Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my interview series. Today, it's Valentine's Day as I record this, so what better than to talk to a new political party called the Love Party? Sounds frivolous, sounds fluffy, but is it? Is there a lot more to it than meets the eye? Well, the three founders of the party are with me today. We have Lynn, Julie and Rachel. Now, I'm doing this in a slightly different way because I don't normally have three guests, but let's find out who we've got here first of all. So far, I think that is Lynn. Hello, Lynn.
Hello.
And we should also have Julie. Hello, Julie.
Hello, Richard.
Lovely to see you. And Rachel. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Richard. Hello.
Brilliant. So just for the audience, just so they know, we're going to be talking to all of these, but they may, because of the automation of the camera work, we'll see how it goes. So ladies, I always get slapped by my wonderful girlfriend who says if I call her a girl, I'll get slapped. So hopefully we're all friends here. You're a new political party, aiming to radically change the way the existing government and parliament works by looking at your manifesto. Is that right? Lynn, you're up there first.
I'm here, yes.
Yes.
Well, I would say we're a non-political party. We are not going to do things the old way. We will not be pushed into left and right. We're above, as I think we all should be now. And yes, we want to do things completely differently because we want to take the power back from Parliament, from government, and from the corporations and from all these top-down heavy institutions. We want to take that back, and we want the people to have the power, to empower themselves. At the moment, you can't just take down Parliament and say, here's your power, people, because the people themselves are so disempowered. They've had so much rubbish chucked at them over, it's probably decades now.
Yes.
So much, the education and everything has been, in my view, designed to disempower, to make you have to rely on corporations, governments, experts, all this sort of thing. So we want to have people empowered to take their power back.
Now, it's very interesting you should say that because I've interviewed recently William Keat, who's been talking about the UK constitution, or a constitution that exists really for the benefit of the people, that the government has sort of whitewashed over and said, oh, well, we're not playing by those rules, which is much more to do with common law, I suppose. So is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Sort of, and Rachel's the expert here. I'm going to hand straight over to Rachel when it
comes. Okay, Rachel, hello.
Yeah, Richard, I absolutely loved your William Keat interview, and he is the first person that I've heard truly expressing the truth of common law and the power of the people, which I would imagine probably 99% of people do not realise the power of a trial by jury, not just to judge in terms of guilty or not guilty, but also in terms to judge any legislation and throw any piece of legislation out. So this knowledge of our common law rights, just imagine if that knowledge was restored to the people, you do not have to consent to having your case heard by magistrates, for example. You can just state, I require a trial by jury, and that is your right. It's an unalienable right to ask the people to decide your fate.
So do you think you could do that if you've got a court case coming up? If you're someone watching this and you're thinking, oh, I've had that parking infringement, they're chasing me, and now it's going to the magistrate's court. Do you think they can ask that? Would they be taken seriously?
Well, I have actually done that myself, Richard.
Oh.
I have attempted to assert that on a parking fine, and it was quite interesting going through that process and stating that throughout. And the thing about this is that it's like chipping away, because at the moment the system will attempt to bulldoze you down its route, down the route that it wants you to. But if enough people stand up, and we know a guy who has asserted his right to a trial by jury, and his case was listed for May 2024.
Oh, right.
Is how far ahead. I mean,
yes.
So can you imagine if everyone required a trial by jury? the entire justice system would have to review itself.
So yeah, so if it's lawful to do that and people do that, then it has to follow the law, and slowly things would change.
I think it's like with all of these things, if enough people stand up and speak out and say, no, we do not consent, that is how en masse the people will bring their power back, because the power has been taken away, and I believe it's been taken away deliberately.
And I would agree with you there, having only recently sort of started to talk about this and being shared various links to various different viewpoints. It's certainly opened my eyes, and this is why I'm doing these sort of shows now and talking to people like yourself to try and get the message more and more out. So coming back to the love party, what brought the overall concept from you three women to set something up, and what do you realistically think is going to happen? We potentially have got some elections coming up in a year, maybe 18 months' time. We only have the two big parties to sort of realistically think is going to happen. Are you going to disrupt that and give people something else to think about? Who wants to address that?
Julie?
Yeah. And it's about us being there for the people and helping them to realise that actually we can live love and not fear. And anything that is not love is fear. And so while people are in fear of all the legislation that's put in place that's not actually helpful for life, then why have we even got it all in place? We need to really start to consider what are the basics in life, and why aren't we educating every person of all ages so that we can appreciate what really matters in life? And we're sort of being given some erroneous things, and I've sort of had some experiences of the legal system, and I was surprised when I started having those experiences that I was even told, well, if you ask for what you really need, you're going to be sort of counted down to a lower level. So I had to ask for more than I needed, because then I would be able to cover the basics. But it's like, well, if I know what I need as a basic, why do I have to ask for more? But also, when we look at life, we're not being taught to live. We're not being taught to grow foods, to be able to cook foods, tidy up after ourselves. And there's so much that we could be being taught about socializing. And instead of categorizing people as different labels, actually all is one, and we need to learn to be authentic.
There's so many things in there that I'm absolutely on your side with. The one thing that it seems to me, and I think because everything's been incrementally pushed down on us, you don't realize just how many rules in life that we're living by, and we're continually being funneled into living in a way that's not actually that beneficial for us, instead of letting us decide for ourselves what's good for us. I feel like, if you park your car in the old days, I remember the old yellow peril, but they would actually be on your side a bit. You park some and they say, I wouldn't park there if you go down there. They were there to help you rather than penalise you. But it does seem now as if everything is about penalising you and extracting money. Would you say that's true?
And even in schools, the inspection process, I know from family, used to be the inspectors would go in and give support to the teachers and the whole education system. But then when I went into teaching, it was very much about telling us off, and have we got all the paperwork, and a ridiculous amount of paperwork that isn't actually supporting education and not letting the teachers be flexible. So if it snows today, I could go outside with the children, whereas now I'm not allowed to, because we've got all this stuff I've got to sort of do today's work.
Yes.
I think the other thing, Richard, is that the heart and soul is going out of things. So everything's black and white, yes, no. And the danger with that, because of the AI and robotics, is a very dangerous situation, because if we do get to that point of robotic everything, it's just black, white, yes, no. There's no heart, there's no soul, there's no humanity, and that's, to me, that's a very dangerous route.
How do you go about bringing these essential ingredients, the sort of the standards and the morals and the role models that we once had back into society?
I would say let's get back so that we each know our neighbours and know our communities, and we've not got everybody on the sort of 9 to 5 or however many hours, just work, and not being able to connect properly with their local community, and particularly to support the children to learn about connecting with people in community and our teenagers, and as they become young adults. But I'll now pass on to Lynn, because I know she was going to say something.
Oh, thanks, Julie. I was pretty much going to say the same thing, I think. Yes, we basically want people to become much more self-reliant and communities to become much more independent. We think that that's the way that you take power back. So if you have communities that are energy independent, if you have communities that can produce their own food, or, well, not produce just their own food, but enough to sustain them. I mean, obviously you can buy more in if you want and luxuries, but if you're sustainable, self-sustaining, and you have your water and you have your food and you have your energy, then you've got a lot of power in that community. It means the community can look after itself. It can then extend that to education, it can extend it to health and all sorts of other things. And that takes the power away from the corporations and away from the government, away from the electricity companies, away from all these things that are controlling us, because there is an agenda, I feel, to get us into a box and keep us there in this box, controlled by the goggle box, the television, So basically stay in your box. And part of that is that they want to, Project Fear. Keep you in your box and make sure you're dependent. And we're going to do exactly the opposite. Get out there, have fun, socialize, get your community going. Whatever it takes. I mean, going to the pub, saying hello to people, going and offering them to do their garden or something.
One of the excuses that we've got for putting us in the box, and things like the 15-minute cities, which will be literally putting us in a box and forcing us not to travel, or if we do, we're going to be penalised, is of course the whole climate's warming up, the planet's burning up, we're all going to die in horrible agonising death if we don't.
Don't get me started.
But this is the reason that is given to us why they want to restrict our movements, and it's all very beneficial for us, and it's going to be very convenient because you won't have to go very far. You're shaking your head.
No, this is what they always do. It's what they did with COVID. It's what they did with everything. You create a problem. You get a reaction from people and you hand the solution, which, oh dear, it takes away some freedoms. What a surprise. And it is just another form of tyranny. The climate science is about as accurate as the COVID science was. It's, Rockefeller dictated dogma. If you look at the actual science, a lot of it's been changed a little bit now. They've taken out the odd ice age here and all that sort of thing to make the curves nice and fit the narrative. So one of the things that we do need to do is have independent science and independent universities. At the moment, they're not. It's changed a lot since I went to university. So we need to get people properly educated. They need to educate themselves as well.
How do we do that? I mean, it seems so entrenched with the march, as they say, through the institutions of this ideology coming in, which seems to get worse and worse. The sort of things that they're teaching children with critical race theory and the sexualization of children and all of those sort of things. How that you're setting up a party? How do we get people on your side? You're talking extremely reasonably, and I think most people would say, these old values, the family values of bringing up and looking after ourselves and eating healthy and all those sort of things, they're fantastic. How do we get there?
The thing is, Richard, I think it's important for us to really realise the level of the military grade PSYOP the amount of behavioral psychology which has been used and abused, actually, I should say, in essentially brainwashing the masses. And so there are so many people who are kind of sleepwalking in this mind control program. And I know from having trained in trauma healing that a pattern interrupt where you can wake someone up from that program, that liberation, I mean, the Love Party stands for liberation, opportunity, vitality, empowerment. And the key thing, liberation, is liberating ourselves from the mind control. And that starts at a very early age with the education system, which is a kind of brainwashing system. So this awakening of consciousness where people are starting to actually question everything is such a key thing right now.
So this is a long term, I mean, it's taken a long time for people to get us into the situation we're in. They didn't just sort of one day invent it and we all agreed. We all sort of grew up with this. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I've seen that how schooling was for me is so different. My girlfriend's son goes to a school. She's younger than me, and so he's at a school where they're using fingerprint technology to pay for things. Now, in my mind, that's effectively grooming children to have a cashless society and using digital IDs and biometrics to be able to achieve things, which means there's somebody else in the decision making about whether you can potentially buy something or not, rather than if you're just using cash, which is a private transaction and no one else need to be involved. So what you're saying is, or are you saying, is this a long process? We've got to almost start again so that people, but hopefully not as long, a bit more rapidly, so that people start again and as you say, get children to be growing up in a society in which those good values, those morals, and the all those things that you've been talking about is basically there. It's not a surprise to them.
Well, it's interesting because I've worked for the banking industry and I did institute of banking exams, and I was always sort of wondering, well, why do we have to have money tied in with the gold vaults? What's the point of storing gold somewhere that people can't access it other than to change it as part of that monetary system? And then as I got into being a complementary therapist, and well, even before I was trained as a teacher and had my own children, and using gold to offset the inflammation of a sty on the eye, that is a much better use of gold. And also they've shown that silver can be really healthy and beneficial. Colloidal silver is a particular example there. But now, as a complementary therapist, when I first started in 2005, I qualified, and we were starting because of the House of Lords report. They realised that complementary therapists didn't kill people, so they realised that we didn't need voluntary regulation for them, even though we need statutory regulation for doctors and other medics and some other medical professionals, because they literally do kill people. And so I was quite optimistic that we were starting to integrate the more traditional approaches to healthcare, even though sometimes they try to call the allopathic approach to healthcare traditional. It is not. When you think reflexology actually goes back to ancient Egyptian times and even beyond that, and they know that it significantly helps health. When I first qualified, people were working as volunteers in complementary therapies with oncology, so with cancer patients. Why were they having to only have volunteers that weren't paid in those positions, but at least they were in there and being allowed? So then they set up the Complementary and Natural Healthcare Council, and what they didn't realise was they wouldn't get as many registrants as they were expecting, because people like me are trained in different therapies, and each of my therapies would be a different registrant. So then they decided to do professional standards authority, health and social care, and bring the voluntary regulation in. But I could tell that times were changing in not a helpful way. Okay. So when you think back to the education system, and I'm also a qualified teacher and I've taught from nursery to adults, with the national curriculum, we're very much bums on seats, standardised tests that aren't appropriate. And even when I was doing master's degree qualifications to do with special needs coordination, teaching and assessing specific learning difficulties, a lot of the teachers weren't even accepting dyslexia and things like that, and still don't. I even know someone who only within the last 5 years was diagnosed in her 3rd year of degree, of education degree, of being dyslexic. And yet she'd had to retake English language GCSE from such a young age. But I now know that homeschooled children can actually take the GCSEs at a younger age and are actually doing stuff much more, if we call it more in qualification terms, much younger.
Yes, my sister, funnily enough, when I brought my children up in the 90s, in the early 90s, my kids went to ordinary state school, but my sister's 3 boys, she homeschooled, and everyone thought she was mad back then. But she stuck it out, and they've all excelled really well. I'm lucky to say that my kids also have excelled, but I think that's more to do with our own outlook and challenging. We had a lot of problems with the schools in the way that they were getting the kids to do meaningless stuff. And so there was numerous battles. But it seems worse today. And so as a party, what would be your take on schools going in the future? How would you deal with the children's education?
I'll just come in just because I'm on screen, but I know Lynn wants to.
Yeah.
At the moment, we've got prison-like schools, and even waiting to get in to go and fetch the children or take them into school. And we don't need it like that. What we need is an education facility within 10 minutes, easy walking distance of every front door. And we need mixed age classes, because just because you're a certain age doesn't mean you've got certain learning and certain happenings. And we need to be a lot more eclectic, if that's the correct term. But I'll let Lynn come in now. Thank you.
Yes. Well, again, I think it's about empowering people, giving them confidence, because parents are the first teachers.
Yes.
I home ed mine. I took them out of school because of apathy, which I just think is completely unacceptable in a child. And it's as a result of them being told you haven't passed this or you haven't got this score on spelling. But yes, my vision is to have a lot of choice in education, and also to have it in a much more mix and match way, with a lot of the community helping out. I mean, my daughter had pottery lessons from the woman next door. She was wonderful. She loved it. She had ballet lessons from ex-Royal Ballet teachers down the road. She went to home ed classes. She goes to evening classes that school children go to. You can mix and match. You do not need this very rigid structure. One size fits all. Well, one size fits nobody, in fact. Need that, but you need the parents to be confident to know that they did that. And I think lockdown did help a bit with that, because people, we had a huge increase in home education because people realized that their kids were thriving at home and they could do a lot with them. So it's actually there's a schools bill going through that's trying to reverse that, because obviously this government doesn't want to lose control of the education. But yeah, starting with empowerment, making people realize they can actually do this. They can grow their own food. They can educate their own children. I'm going to give you an example here, actually.
Okay.
Flipping experts. Everyone's reliant on experts. And it's my own husband who bought a book on chopping wood, which I was absolutely furious about. I was like, Stone Age man managed this. You don't need an expert to tell you how to chop and stack wood. Work it out. And I think that's pretty much the same with everyone. They don't keep their own chickens, or they don't, they don't set up a choir because they don't know, or they don't run a class for something because they don't know they don't have the correct qualification.
Is that because people they don't want to fail? People have
yes, I think there is an element. Again, fear. It's this fear that's been engendered in us that we don't want to try because we don't want to fail, and also we think we can't do it. Oh, don't you have to have a qualification for that? No. Don't you have to have insurance? Probably not.
I mean, these days everything's on YouTube. I don't really understand why kids have to go to school at all. Because I mean, certainly how to do things, practical things. Obviously, you want a professional who knows what he's doing. If he's doing a tiling or something, if you want it to look nice,
then you can do it. You can do this.
But you can, you can learn, and you can do your kitchen or your bathroom and go, okay, I've really messed up here, but next time. You get it right. And there's a sense of achievement, isn't there, doing a lot of things for yourself?
And you can do it badly. It doesn't, you might have to do it again, but you can do it badly. And I think there's a lot of this move from fear. All our party, it's all about raising the vibration of yourself and the community. Move from fear and get to love. We've done all the fear. We've had enough of it. We've had it up to here. We've had fear. We've had hate, division, all that sort of thing, which keep us down and allow other people to take our power. We move into love. We can just look at them and go, nah, actually, don't fancy doing it that way. Pretty good with the way I want to do it. And that's what we want to do. We want to raise everybody up, raise the vibration of the whole mass conscious, the community, your own vibration, and just be able to look after yourself, or at least be able to, be confident to have a go and be confident of knowing where to go and ask for help and things like that. And just remember, you don't need the government. They're your servant.
So we live on an island here in the UK, obviously with Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and England, of course. And recently, we've had a lot of people coming to this island, and we seem to be unable to look after our borders for one reason or another. How will the Love Party? What's your policy on borders? I mean, if you love everybody, are you welcoming everybody in, or what do you do?
Not at the moment, because there's too much disturbance in the world, and I think it's being deliberately created. Populations are being deliberately mass moved. Sorry, that's a terrible term, and I think there's an agenda there. And it's breaking up communities there in the country that they're from. It's depriving them of their young workers, and here, where they're coming in without any ability to integrate at this time. So at the moment, no. I mean, in my ideal world, of course, there would be no borders, but that's a long way off. Until we stop this manufactured crisis after crisis everywhere else in the world, and this organised migration of populations, organised mass migration, then we actually don't have that luxury at this time. But yeah, it would be lovely, but no.
So what will you, I mean, if you were now taking over the reins, if suddenly the Tories said, we can't cope with this, look, the Love Party, let's just let them run it, they've got some great ideas. What would you do with these migrants that are sitting in hotels up and down the countryside that are worrying people who live nearby and potentially disturbing the peace because their culture is very different to our culture?
I'm going to let Rachel have this. She's been waving at me.
Rachel.
Yeah, I feel that all of us, because we're all mums and we've all kind of run domestic households. I don't want to sound too much like Margaret Thatcher here, because I think she said something back in the 80s along these lines, which is you get your own house in order first before you put your own oxygen mask on before you help other people. I mean, can you imagine someone like Lynn being the Prime Minister of this country and to actually move from this patriarchal command control way of running the country into a much more of a matriarchal way of running it, like as you would a household, which is you look after the family and the community. And I do agree with Lynn that there has been a massive amount of big corporate involvement in wars for many decades now. And we have to see through the manipulation of the 1% elite that is behind the engineering, which is causing war after war after war. And it's time for us to declare peace, not war. That's what we should all be saying. Enough now. We're not going to tolerate this. Over to Julie.
Right, well, with that, if you were to think of these people that have come into this country and are even some local homeless were thrown out of a hotel to allow some immigrants to come in, Now, I know each of us is historically an immigrant. So if we look back in our ancestry, we are immigrants and we need to accept that. Okay. But what we need to do is people that are coming in, they have got energy that they could be using in positive ways to support the community that they're taken into. And if you think of World War II, when people were moved from London up into the different countryside of the United Kingdom, and we didn't have them kicking off, and people were supported and supported their local communities. So I would literally, if they're having a free hotel room or whatever, right, they need to be out there cleaning the streets or whatever, some role that they could be taking. I've even seen some people this morning that were supposedly cleaning up my local park. There were about 5 or 6 of them walking together. I was in a little area with my granddaughters with a sort of homemade swing that had been made by somebody else, some rope and a piece of wood. There was loads of rubbish around where I was. They never even came near to there, which they should have done. Instead, they were just walking together along a pathway and then round and then out, and they were hardly picking anything up. But also, when you talk about tradespeople, I had the experience only 6 years ago. I was having a new bathroom and I was having a fitted bath with a shower above it, and then a sink and a toilet, all with a little cabinet thing with it. And at the end of the bath, I knew there was enough room to put a little cupboard for putting towels in. So I said to the plumber, oh, could you put me a little levered sort of thing there for me towels to go in? And he's, oh, you need a joiner for that. And I just looked at him. I said, well, you're doing all the cupboarding round the sink and the toilet and the front of the bath. And he, oh, yeah, of course I can. Now, when I was a child, that's what tradespeople did. They were multi, but also what tradespeople have ended up doing, because of health and safety, supposedly, they have to keep doing these, redoing the qualifications. That doesn't mean they're necessarily safe, because I know sometimes they just get that qualification and some of them cut corners, which is why I only go with people that I know or is highly recommended to me. And so just because you've got that qualification doesn't mean that you're good at doing it. But also a lot of the corporations that are to do with the machinery and that they're installing, or the accessing the resources that they're using, like the boilers and things like that, they keep paying them. And they are feeding the plumbers. They're feeding the electricians in ways that we don't need that happening. And we need people to be more flexible and versatile and do a whole job, and not have to necessarily get people in just because of the supposed insurance and health and safety side of stuff. Yes, we want them safe, but I've experienced people as multi-trade people that are safer and doing that whole job so that they know really what's happening on site.
So I used saying then, really, this is a sort of society problem. We've got into this. We've put people's jobs into boxes, a bit like the old days of the unions. I remember visiting when I was 18 a TV studio, because I was keen to know how a TV studio worked, and they came to a point where they were about to finish, and they had to finish at this one time at 6 o'clock, and there was a something on the set that had to be moved. And they had to go and get a carpenter from the other studio, and somebody had to run. And I just said, why can't someone just pick it up and take it off? They said, oh, no, we've got to get the carpenter to do that. Otherwise, and if they didn't finish this scene, it meant that they would all have to come back the next day and do this one tiny little thing. They managed to do it, and the bloke came in at the last minute. And it just seemed a really weird way of working, instead of people just saying, look, for the benefit of everybody, let's just all work together. And is that what you're saying in terms of the society now has become, people are worried about their jobs, they're trying to get as much money for these individual things that they can, and we've lost, in a way, the sense of community and being part of something in which everybody would, in that case, they would work a little harder. They're not clocking in at a certain time and walking off, and work becomes meaningful again.
And this is where, if we got into sort of multi areas that we work in, I personally need variety in my life. And that's why I'm trained in different therapies, and that was until COVID kicked off. That was my main sort of employment as such. But my approach to therapies even is my teaching archetype comes out, and I love to help teach the people that I'm working with how to look after themselves. And we really need a much more eclectic way of just living and accepting that sort of life. And yes, you can get your specialists, and that has its role, but minimal usually, to being able to teach the other people so that they can be specialised enough. And I'm going to hand over to Rachel now.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that my perception of this, and this is through really understanding common law, is that people have made the authorities their God. And people are so used to following the rules and the regulations, so that they're just following orders without questioning. And that's exactly what happened during the whole COVID era. People just doing what they were told without saying, hold on a minute, this doesn't make any sense, or in fear that they were going to lose their job. So I think that this again, a pattern interrupt of this willingness to obediently comply without question, because we're in a very dangerous situation where, a bit like in Nazi Germany, where people just did what they were told without questioning. Over to Lynn.
So it's all about, I think, empowering again and liberating. And part of that is to just realise what government has done and is doing. It's taking ever more of your money, ever more of your income, and providing ever less. Now, personally, I'm sure I've said to these two, I would rather have the WI looking after our borders than what is currently happening. I mean, I know some fierce ladies at the WI, sorry about that, but I would honestly rather have Dad's Army, the Home Guard, down in Kent, looking after the border there. I think all of us as local communities are far more powerful than our government is. Our government's shown it's either absolutely helpless or it's complicit.
Yes.
So basically, we cannot do a worse job. We can actually we can do a lot better.
Yes.
We can provide a good healthcare system if we are left with that money in our pocket. If we can actually do that, and as communities, when we get together, we can provide all this. And the other thing about having low taxes and being energy independent and all the rest of it is that we don't need to work the long hours. Now, if you think about the 50s, you didn't have, you had basically your house, your children went to school, you had your car, and one parent would be doing the work, would be going out to work. They probably wouldn't even be doing a full week, and they would be able to pay all their bills without any problem. Now, our standard of living hasn't gone up so very much, and yet now 2 parents are having to work just to pay the debt, just to keep their heads above water. Now, there's a whole load of issues there. There's a whole load of issues about mortgages and how the cap was taken off what you could borrow and things like that, creating debt slavery. So debt slavery and high taxes are keeping people very disempowered. And we actually can't go out and spend money in our communities because it's all gone to the government and the energy companies. So there's another point of liberation there that we, get in there, look at energy, look at food supply, take it back to the locals. And
so your overall party, if I can sum it up in some way from listening to you, very enlightened ladies, if I may say so, is you're not there just to be another administration to crack the whip. No, that's what I'm saying. You're not there just to sort of go, how can we now just take over and fleece the people and extract everyone and guide everybody into what they're doing and give, these are our aspirations and you're going to do them anyway, whether you like it or not. And actually, we're going to change our mind anyway once we're in power. But you're very much being guided by the very people who are in the community. So although you might start with some basics, it's down to the community to work it out for themselves.
Very much. With the turkeys voting for Christmas, we absolutely would be, the ideal position would be that if we got into government, we would put ourselves out of a job.
Yes.
That is absolutely the ideal. Sorry, Julie. Over to you.
No, that's okay. So really, when we look at what the government do and the expenses and the salaries that they're paid, and they are busy going down to London so much, and calling each other honourable and doing a lot of pomp and ceremony, and then deriding each other. And so we do not want that approach to government at all. And what we want really is each politician, councillor, government, whatever, to minimally go to any of those very central meetings, minimise legislation to common law based, do no harm, and then we actually need minimal legislation anyway. And we know now through the common law that the legislation that is trying to impose isn't actually lawful unless it's to do with stopping harm happening. And so we need people out in their local communities. The councils can stop doing their ridiculous meetings that they keep doing with their pomp and ceremony as well, and these planning application stuff, and taking our fields away while still we've got brown sites. We've got loads of empty houses and properties in the centre of my town of Mansfield, and yet supposedly downstairs they're not allowed to even put people in accommodation there. Why we've had homeless that has increased over the last decade or more to the levels that it has. And I used to work with the homeless, and then the charity work money was withdrawn, and so people started dying because people like me weren't working with them and they were just being left on the streets. But why on earth they're being on the streets and not being able to give the basics of the food and stuff that they need, and yet they have all these sort of benefits that they've got to claim for, the ridiculous amount of paperwork that people have to go through, and who is actually benefiting from that? But also, why has our society made doctors the first port of call when someone's ill? I've worked with the podiatrists at Birmingham, and they've developed nail care, which is about trimming nails, that's actually reduced amputations, increased mobility, and lots of other health benefits. But I've known carers and family that have been in fear of trimming their family's own nails, especially if they've got diabetes and things like that.
Gracious.
But through that level 2 nail care training, I'd actually knew how to trim my own nails better than I'd ever done in my life. And this is the basics that we need. But also, it means that the people that do need to see the podiatrist get to see them. So it reduces their waiting list. And it also helps them. They've got a hotline so that the nail carers can literally contact the podiatrist, do a visual thing so that they can be advised, do they need to see you, or is there something I can be doing? And we could do that in lots of other areas of life. And that's what we need to use technology for in a positive way. So I'll leave that for someone else to continue if you wish.
Well, it sounds to me like the three of you have not only a party but an actual movement, a whole thing. It sounds like you're quite dangerous in terms of the existing government and the power that is out there. You're dangerous because you're, as you said, you want to empower the people.
Love is dangerous to these people. They need you in fear.
Yes.
Being out of fear and in love is these days an act of rebellion. Raising your vibration is an act of rebellion. Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, and I think all of us, I mean, Richard, people like you speaking out, so many people who are just taking the power back. You don't have to wait to get a contract with the BBC. You just set up your own channel and away you go. This is what's happening. There is a whole awakening of consciousness and a movement of people. We're not waiting anymore for permission. We're just doing it. So this isn't just about the Love Party. This is everyone in this whole movement, everyone in the freedom movement, everyone who is standing up and saying, no, enough of this nonsense.
And I think people are waking up now. The pandemic, I think, was something that made people a little bit more aware of the controls that have been put over and the fear. And they are now, they've known that the mainstream media is not telling the proper story anymore. And the government are not addressing things that are so obviously happening. And so that they are looking elsewhere, and they're coming across YouTube channels and other video platforms and other people who've set up movements, parties and what have you. So,
and I think one thing that's really important to say, Richard, is that In the last by-election, or the one in Manchester in December, 74.2% of the electorate didn't bother to vote. The level of disengagement with politics, and people are just disinterested, or they just don't believe that they can make any impact. What if all of those 74.2% of people suddenly said, actually, I'm gonna bother. I'm going to just go and I'm going to vote out this nonsense, because both of those parties, they're both funded essentially by big corporate interest. Keir Starmer quite openly admitted that Davos is his kind of go-to.
He did, yeah. I saw that clip.
And so what if those 74.2% all said, actually, no, we're just gonna go vote for love? Yeah. It could completely transform politics overnight. So we're not going after the serious old political system. We're going after the lost electorate that just are apathetic and don't feel that they can make a difference. Julie.
Yeah, on that sort of way of thinking, if you think of how social media is tried to be made of a sort of bad thing for people, we've only come together because of social media. I have contacts throughout the world and some clients that I work with through the world, because I can work like that. And we wouldn't have been able to come together if it wasn't for the online facilities. The local park that I set up a Facebook group in 2018 for, so it had been deteriorated for years, quite deliberately, from what I can gather. And so luckily, I'd already known of a local community that basically we'd saved the meadows, as it was called, in Blidworth from being built on. Sadly, since I've moved, they have built on it now. But because of the power that Facebook group had, when I came to Mansfield, back to Berry Hill area of Mansfield, I was only out of it a very short time. I thought, oh, right, I've heard that they're going to try and close this park and build on it, where I've been accessing since 1965. So I set the Facebook group up, didn't know really what I was doing, but within 3 or 4 days, we had 400 people that did a protest gathering, and gradually it's become rejuvenated since 2018. I've now got over 3,300 people on that Facebook group, and we are a community. We support each other. So if there's a dog missing or something like that, whereas more corporate community group, as it's supposed to be called, they're not interested in dogs going missing. Yes, they'll do the more sort of grand stuff to do with the park and sort of tell us off on certain things and support us with other things, but they're not really as engaging with the people as the Facebook group that I've set up. Now, the local council tried to close me down in 2019 because I was doing so well, but the official group...
You shamed them.
The official group that they got knew how supportive I was being of the community. And so I went to a meeting. I didn't realise that there were going to be, I think it was either 3 or 4 of their managers, the council managers, and just me.
Gosh.
And they said, basically, they wanted me to close the Facebook group down. And I said, no, I'm not. And I was passionate about it. And then they ended up saying, you're not going to close it, are you, Julie? I'm like, no, I'm not. And now we do actually get posts on, even from Mansfield District Council.
Oh, right.
So what a wonderful job we're doing. Yeah. So thank you.
So we need more strong people like the 3 women I've been talking to this evening. It's the Love Party, love-party.co.uk. I urge my viewers to go and have a look at it and get in touch, support, talk about it, all those issues in your community and online and wherever, because I feel that just knowing about something is one thing, but we've got to sort of get people talking and expressing and talking about the common law and the Constitution and family values and all those things. And I think you ladies have sort of encapsulated something that's very much vital but missing. I'm going to have to bring it to an end, unfortunately, but thank you, ladies. So thank you, Julie, who's on the screen at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to Lynn also. Thank you very much, Lynn.
Thank you for having us. And if we can get people as candidates, please. We're calling you beacons because we want a network of light across the UK.
Oh, I like that. That's very good. Yeah. And Rachel, thank you also very much.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, so much for your support and for having us on.
Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Do check them out. I'll put the link in the description. And again, big thanks to the ladies for talking about that. I hope if you're watching this on Valentine's Day or next Valentine's Day, whenever, or any other day, that you have a wonderful time and think about some of the things that we've spoken about. Until next time, goodbye.